The message in the family group chat sat there, unread, for 47 minutes. I know because I watched the little check marks. 2 gray check marks meant delivered. No blue. Nobody had opened it yet, or if they had, they weren't acknowledging it. I sat in the discharge waiting area of Mercy General in Columbus, still in the paper-thin hospital gown under my cardigan, my overnight bag at my feet, and I watched those check marks like they were a verdict being deliberated. My message had been simple. I'd written it 3 times before sending, worried I was asking for too much. Just got discharged. Flight home to Charlotte lands at 4:15. Is anyone able to pick me up from the airport? I'm a little unsteady on my feet still. Love, Mom. I'd added love, Mom, because my daughter-in-law once told me my texts felt cold without a sign-off. I'd been signing my texts ever since, like letters. 63 years old, signing text messages. The surgery had been 10 days earlier. A partial nephrectomy. They'd found a mass on my left kidney during a routine scan, caught it early enough that the surgeon, a kind-faced man named Dr. Ewan, had called it very manageable. I'd driven myself to Columbus because my son had a work conference in Denver he couldn't reschedule, and my daughter-in-law had said she'd look into flights, but never followed up. My neighbor Patsy had offered to come with me, but I didn't want to burden her. She had her own grandchildren to look after. So I drove myself, 4 hours each way, and I'd arranged for the hospital social worker to help me find a ride back to my hotel after surgery. I'd spent 10 days in Columbus alone, in a Marriott Residence Inn, eating soup from a can I'd packed in my suitcase, watching television programs I didn't care about, and video calling my granddaughter Noelle every evening because she was the only one who called without being asked. Noelle was 11. She called me Grandma Joe. She drew me a get-well card with a kidney bean wearing a little bandage and mailed it to the hotel. It arrived on day 4. I cried for 20 minutes. Now the check marks turned blue. Someone had read the message. I sat up a little straighter. My son responded first. Mom, we talked about this. You should have booked a return Uber in advance. Why do you always wait until the last minute? I read it twice. I set the phone down on my knee and looked out the window at the parking lot, at a man loading a wheelchair into a van, at a sparrow pecking at something near a drain. I breathed slowly, the way my post-op instructions said to breathe when I felt any strain. Then my daughter-in-law sent a voice note. I never listen to her voice notes in public because her volume is always high and her tone is always higher. I read the auto-transcription instead. Josephine, honestly, we have so much going on right now. You don't even know. Connor has soccer tryouts this weekend, and I'm helping organize the HOA Fall Festival, and we can't just drop everything. The airport is 45 minutes from our house one way. That's an hour-and-a-half round trip. You have to start thinking ahead about these things. I noticed she didn't say she hoped I was feeling okay. She didn't mention the surgery at all. Connor's soccer tryouts were important. My kidney was not mentioned. I typed back, okay, safe travels home from Denver, sweetheart. Hope the conference went well. I didn't say anything else. I wasn't angry yet. Or maybe I was, but it was the quiet kind, the kind that sits behind your sternum like a stone you've been carrying so long you've forgotten it has weight. I called a car service. The woman on the phone told me there was a 40-minute wait for accessible vehicles, and I explained I wasn't in a wheelchair. I could walk fine, I just needed a regular car. She booked me a driver named Terrell for 20 minutes out. I gathered my bag. I signed my discharge paperwork. I took the elevator down to the main lobby and found a bench near the revolving doors. That's where I met him. He was sitting 2 benches down, talking quietly on the phone, turned slightly away. Well-dressed in the particular way that looks effortless. Dark slacks, a collared shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, silver at his temples. He looked to be in his mid-60s, maybe, with the kind of posture you don't see much anymore, straight without being stiff. I wasn't paying him any particular attention. I was watching the door and keeping track of time and trying not to think about the hour-and-a-half flight home and whether I could lift my carry-on into the overhead bin or would have to ask a stranger. Then my bag slipped off the bench. Not dramatically. It just tipped sideways and slid to the floor, and when I leaned to retrieve it, I moved too quickly and felt that deep pull of protest from my left side that my body had been issuing all week whenever I forgot to be careful. I must have made a sound without meaning to, because before I had straightened up, he was there, picking up my bag, setting it upright. "You okay?" he asked, direct without being intrusive. "Fine," I said. "Thank you. I keep forgetting to move like I'm made of porcelain." He almost smiled. "Recent surgery. 10 days ago, nephrectomy." I don't know why I said the whole word. Force of habit, maybe. I'd spent 10 days saying it to nurses and insurance representatives. "I'm a cardiologist," he said, and I realized he was explaining why the word hadn't fazed him. "Do you have someone meeting you?" "Car service. About 15 minutes. He nodded and stepped back, not hovering, just present. He sat back down on his bench and scrolled his phone, and I appreciated that he didn't make it a thing. His name I learned in the next 10 minutes because we ended up talking the way people in waiting areas sometimes do, was Theodore. He asked me to call him Ted. He'd been visiting a colleague at Mercy General, a research collaboration involving a cardiac monitoring study, and his own flight back to Charlotte wasn't until 7. He lived in Charlotte. I told him I lived in Charlotte too, in Myers Park, and he said he lived just over in Dilworth, barely 4 miles apart. "If your car service falls through," he said carefully, and I could tell he was choosing his words with some awareness of how the offer might land, "I'd be happy to share the ride to the airport. I have a car booked in about 10 minutes. I considered it. I've thought about that moment many times since. A woman alone accepts a ride from a stranger. I heard my daughter-in-law's voice in my head immediately, saying, "Mom, that is how people end up on true crime podcasts." But I looked at Theodore and I thought about the stone behind my sternum and the 2 blue check marks in the soccer tryouts, and I said I would appreciate that very much. His car was nicer than mine would have been. He helped me with my bag without making a production of it. In the car, he asked where I'd grown up, and I said, Roanoke, Virginia, and he said he'd gone to school in Charlottesville. And we talked about the Blue Ridge the way people do when they both grew up within 100 miles of it, like it was a private language. He asked at some point whether I had family in Columbus. "No," I said. "I had the surgery here because this is where the specialist was. I came alone." He looked at me for a moment, not with pity, something more measured than pity. "That took courage," he said. "Or stubbornness," I said. "They're not mutually exclusive." At the airport, we discovered we were on the same flight. He was upgraded to first class and offered to swap his seat to sit near me in economy, and I told him absolutely not. That was a ridiculous thing to do. He laughed, a real laugh, and said he'd meet me at baggage claim. He did. He also, though I only found out later, had flagged a gate agent at the Charlotte end to have a wheelchair waiting for me, which I didn't strictly need, but which meant I didn't have to carry my own bag through the terminal. When I realized what he'd done, I didn't know whether to be touched or embarrassed, and ended up somewhere in between. He drove me home in his car. We sat in my driveway for a few minutes talking about nothing important. A restaurant in Dilworth that had recently changed chefs, whether the Panthers had any hope this season, and it felt ordinary in the way that very few things had felt ordinary in the past several months. Before he got out to bring my bag to the door, he said, "I'd like to take you to dinner sometime if you're up for it, when you're feeling stronger." I was 63 years old. I had a healing incision on my left side. I was wearing the same cardigan I'd put on 10 days ago in a hotel room in Columbus, and I felt something shift, not dramatically, just slightly, the way a window opens and the air changes. "I'd like that," I said. I did not tell my son. The dinners became regular. Ted was a widower. His wife had passed 4 years before, a brain aneurysm, sudden and devastating. He had 2 grown daughters who lived in Atlanta, who he spoke of with great warmth, and who called him every Sunday. He'd thrown himself into his research after losing her, which is how he'd ended up in Columbus that particular Wednesday. And he said that sometimes he wondered if the universe has a sense of timing that humans can't perceive. I told him I wasn't sure about the universe, but I did believe in showing up. You show up, things happen. You don't. They don't. You showed up alone for a major surgery, he said, in another city. I didn't have much choice. You had choices, he said, and the way he said it was gentle but clear, and I understood he meant the choices other people had made, not mine. Noelle found out first, as she always finds things out first, because children notice everything. She was at my house for a sleepover. Her parents were at a corporate event in Asheville, and Ted stopped by to bring me a book he'd mentioned and to check on the incision site, because my follow-up appointment had been rescheduled twice. Noelle opened the door before I could get to it, looked up at him, looked back at me with enormous eyes, and said, "Grandma Joe, who is this?" Ted crouched down to her level. "I'm Ted. I'm a friend of your grandmother's." Noelle considered him for a long moment with the solemn judgment of an 11-year-old. Then she said, "Are you the doctor kind or the normal kind?" "The doctor kind," he said. "Cardiologist." "That's the heart kind," she said. "That's right. Grandma Joe had kidney surgery," she said in a tone that suggested he should be informed of this. "I know," he said. "That's how we met." She looked at him a while longer. Then she stepped back from the door and said, "You can come in. I'm making grilled cheese." I think I loved her most in that moment. She told her mother approximately 36 hours later. I know this because my daughter-in-law called me at 8:30 on a Sunday morning, which she had never done in the 11 years she'd been my son's wife, and asked me, with a brightness in her voice that I recognized as the brightness that precedes a landmine, how I was feeling. "I'm well," I said, "feeling stronger every week." "That's so good," she said. "Noelle mentioned you've been seeing someone." "I've been spending time with a friend, yes." "A doctor friend," she said. "Yes." There was a pause. "That's just, wow, how wonderful for you." Another pause. "What kind of medicine does he practice?" "Cardiology," I said. "Why?" "Oh, no reason," she said. "That's just cardiology." "That's a very respected field." I understood then. I felt the stone in my chest again, but it had a different quality now. It wasn't sadness. It was something clearer. My son called that evening. He was warmer than he'd been in months. He asked how I was feeling, said he was sorry. The discharge from Columbus had been such a scramble, said they should have figured something out better. He used words like, "in retrospect," and "we should have," in a way that stopped just short of apology. And then, after about 12 minutes of this, he mentioned that his company was expanding its telehealth division, and it would be really valuable to have an advisor with a cardiology background, someone who understood the regulatory landscape. And did I think my friend Ted might be open to a conversation? I let a moment pass. "I'm not sure," I said. "I'll mention it." "No pressure," he said. "Just if it comes up naturally." "Of course." I didn't mention it to Ted. What I did tell Ted was the whole of it, over dinner at a quiet Italian place on East Boulevard that neither of us had tried before. I told him about the discharge, the group chat, the check marks, the soccer tryouts. I told him about Noelle's card with the bandaged kidney bean. I told him about the 11 years of signed text messages and voice notes with loud volumes and thin patience, and about the phone calls that never came while I was in the hospital, and the sudden warmth that arrived the moment someone learned he was a cardiologist in private practice, with research publications and a half-page profile in Charlotte magazine. He listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. Then he said, "What do you want to do about it?" I thought about that, not what I was supposed to want, not what would keep the peace or demonstrate forgiveness or make the holidays easier, what I actually wanted. "I want to stop apologizing for existing," I said. "I want to see my granddaughter as often as she wants to see me. I want to be honest with my son without performing forgiveness. I haven't finished earning yet, and I want. I stopped. Say it, he said. I want to stop eating soup from a can in hotel rooms because I didn't want to bother anyone. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. He didn't say anything for a moment. I think, he said finally, that you are well past the soup from a can stage of your life. I laughed. An actual laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere genuine. That was 4 months ago. Things are different now, and also the same, which is how it usually works. My son and I have had 2 real conversations, one uncomfortable and one less so. I told him I needed him to understand something. That I'd driven 4 hours alone and checked into a hotel alone and had surgery and recovered for 10 days without a single visit or offer of help, and that I hadn't asked for much. And what I had asked for on the day I was discharged had been dismissed in favor of a child's soccer tryout schedule. I told him I wasn't asking him to feel terrible about it forever. I was asking him to understand it had happened, to not rewrite it in his memory as a misunderstanding, and to do better. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, I know, Mom. I know. It wasn't everything, but it was something. My daughter-in-law and I are polite. We will probably always be polite. I have stopped signing my text messages with "Love, Mom" and started signing them with just "Mom." And I notice she hasn't commented on the change. There are things I've accepted about her and things I've decided I don't need to accommodate anymore. And I've learned to tell the difference. Noelle spent last weekend with me. We made pancakes Saturday morning and she taught me a card game she'd learned at school, and we watched an old movie she'd never seen before, and at one point she curled up beside me on the couch and said entirely out of nowhere, Grandma Jo, are you and Ted going to get married? I have absolutely no idea, I said honestly. She seemed to find this satisfying. I think you should, she said. He brought you a book. Boys who bring books are serious. I don't know where she gets these things. Ted and I are taking it slowly, which suits us both. He is steady and direct, and he laughs at his own expense, and he brings books. He asks questions, and he listens to the answers, and he does not make me feel like an inconvenience. These are not small things. I've learned to recognize them as what they actually are. Enormous things, wearing ordinary clothes. I turned 64 last month. Ted took me to Asheville for the weekend, the mountains and the galleries, and a dinner that made me feel like someone who deserved a dinner like that. On the last evening, we sat on the porch of the inn and watched the light go off the hills, and I thought about that discharge waiting room bench, the slipping bag, the measured crouching down, the words that took courage. I thought about the stone behind my sternum and how much lighter it is now. Not gone. Some things don't leave, but lighter. I also thought, though I would not have admitted it at the time, that maybe my daughter-in-law was half right about one thing. I should have planned better. Not for the Uber. For myself, I should have demanded earlier and clearer to be treated like someone worth showing up for. I know that now. I know what it feels like when someone shows up. And I am not going back to soup from a can. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the surgery, not the hotel room, not even the group chat. It's the bag slipping off the bench. Such a small thing. And the fact that a stranger noticed before my own family did, before the people who'd known me for decades, tells you something about what attention actually looks like when it's real. I used to think that loyalty meant staying quiet, that keeping the peace was its own kind of goodness. For years, I signed my text messages "Love, Mom," because someone told me I came across as cold, and I adjusted. And I kept adjusting. And somewhere in all that adjusting, I stopped noticing how little was being adjusted for me in return. That's not virtue, that's just erosion. There's a difference between being a good person and making yourself smaller so other people feel comfortable. I confused the two for a long time. What I've come to understand, and I don't say this lightly, because it took a kidney surgery in a city where I knew no one to finally see it clearly, is that how we treat people when it costs us something is the only honest measure of who we are. My son and his wife weren't cruel in a dramatic way. They were careless in an ordinary way, which is somehow harder to name and harder to recover from. Carelessness doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates, quietly, in every unreturned call, every rescheduled visit, every moment when someone needed you and you calculated whether it was convenient. Ted didn't know me. He had no reason to flag that gate agent, no reason to wait at baggage claim, no reason to sit in my driveway talking about nothing until I felt steady enough to go inside. He did those things because that's what decent people do when they're paying attention. And watching him, I started to ask myself harder questions. Not about him, but about what I'd been accepting as normal for years. Intelligence isn't only about knowing things. It's about being willing to see what's actually in front of you, even when it's uncomfortable. I wasn't seeing clearly for a long time. And then there's the matter of just going. Getting in that car with a stranger, flying home alone, having the surgery alone in the first place. People have called that brave. I called it stubbornness. But I think the honest word is endurance. The decision to keep moving forward even when the people who were supposed to show up didn't. Noelle showed me that kind of endurance is hereditary, in the best way. She drew me a kidney bean with a bandage on it and mailed it to a hotel in Columbus. She is 11 years old, and she already understands something my son has not yet fully learned, that love is not a feeling you hold privately. It's a thing you do, out loud, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. I'm not angry anymore, or not only angry. What I am is clearer than I've been in years. I know what it feels like when someone treats you like your time and comfort matter. I know the weight of a stone you've been carrying so long you forgot it was there, and I know how much lighter a room feels when you finally set it down. I am not going back to soup from a can. And I am not going back to signing texts, "Love Mom," to people who couldn't drive 45 minutes. That's not coldness, that's just knowing what I'm worth.